Everybody, welcome to Big Nate's Reading Club. We got a dope ass stream today. Today we are discussing The Circular Ruins by Jorge Luis Borges, a story full of mysticism and mythology. Look what we about to be talking about. We got Heraclitus, we got all these books of myths. We're gonna be talking about, like I said, mysticism, Gnosticism, art, you name it. It's gonna be a lit ass episode. So as people are streaming in, we just going first off, I'm brewing some tea, so that's mandatory. And then I figure, as per tradition, I'm gonna just talk about what books I've been reading while the flood of viewers just comes pouring in. We just opened the floodgates, and now, like I said, while everything's coming downstream, we're gonna be talking about some books. What's good? Enlighten. So also, anybody in the chat, yes, what's good? We passing, we win. Yeah. So let me know what everybody else is reading. I'm curious. Also, I believe I fixed that double mic thing because last time it was like picking up two different things. So I think I'm good now. Test. But okay, so unless otherwise spoken, I'm gonna assume that my mic sounds good. And then I'm gonna just talk about some of the books I've been reading, like I said, while people start funneling in. So, of course, get used to seeing this book for the next few weeks because this one's going to take me a minute. The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. I've already talked about this book just in general, but the latest thing that happened, let's see. Hitler is about to invade Poland. And this like the third invasion that he's done, and prior to this nobody has lifted a finger. So he invaded the Sudetenland. France didn't do nothing. He invaded Czechoslovakia. Actually, it was Austria first, and that was just like through pure political propaganda, bro. Like no military intervention, and then also just like pure propagandist invention, like, oh my god, they're doing this, that, and the other to our people. And it's all totally made up. He also kind of infiltrated the Austrian politics with his own like Nazis. And so he took over Austria just like that, no fight. Then Czechoslovakia, I already talked about that in one of my other videos, but despite everything, Britain, France, Russia, they all said, we got Czechoslovakia's back. His generals, like Hitler's generals that is, they said, don't do this, bro. Don't invade Czechoslovakia. You're going to start a world war. They're serious. And then he invaded, or he didn't even really need to invade. It was signed by treaty. Basically, Britain and France signed a treaty on behalf of Czechoslovakia without even asking Czechoslovakia's participation. They're like, yeah, you can take it. And then now Hitler's, he's going past the bluff, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to do it again to Poland. He said, fuck Britain, fuck France, they're losers. They're not going to do shit. He calls them worms, like political worms. It's like, oof. But then, so the only thing he's worried about is Russia. But because Britain and France were slacking on their Russia deal. And that's another thing William Shire talked about. I talked about this in my War and Peace video, where it's like oftentimes in history, people just act in what seem to be like, literally unbelievable ways. And then you have these crazy events in history that took place, which is like by any means of common sense should never have happened. Because Britain and France, they're not taking the Russia thing seriously. They're also, because Russia's, playing both sides. It's like, okay, we open to the Nazis, but if Britain and France got something, we'll do that too. Britain and France dragging their feet, not doing anything. And then they're also like, he also said Poland's government, all of them, he said, act unbelievably stupid. It was something as harsh as that, because Poland was like, nah, we're not going to accept any Russian troop. The central question was like, okay, Poland hates Russia. Can Russian troops come into Poland to protect, to fight against Germany? And Poland's like, nope. And Russia's like, bro, what do you expect us to defend you without being able to enter your country? When it's being invaded, it don't make sense. So, spoiler alert if anyone doesn't know about World War II. But that's about where I'm at right now, and he's about to invade Poland. A web novel about an interdimensional kung fu wizard. I needed some fluff for a bit. Yeah, I mean, that sounds wild. That sounds crazy. But yeah, nice. Okay, so that's what I've been reading. And then I've also, I count this personally, because I'm taking a class, History of Mathematics, and it's a ton of reading. And here, wait, hold up real quick. I think my tea is boiling. Give me 2 seconds, guys. Give me 2 seconds. I'll be right back. All right. Sorry about that little detour, but the tea mandatory. What time is it? Okay, 6:06 for me. So I'm gonna give it about 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. But okay, Okay, I'll make this quick. I'm like I said, I'm taking a class, history of mathematics. I think we're gonna have to read the whole textbook. But there's been some actually really interesting stuff with like the ancient Greeks. Like we've been seeing Pythagoras, and also the OG Thales. He's like apparently one of like the first mathematicians. But okay, just real quick, some lore, and then we'll get into the story. So, like, one of the things that he did was he calculated the height of the pyramids, like, through properties of geometry. Okay, so basically he's like, once the sun was at such a level that a man's shadow was the same height as, like, the actual person, then not Pythagoras, Thales put his little staff down, measured the shadow, and then basically looked at the proportion between his staff and the shadow, measured the shadow of the pyramids, and he's like, and he basically flexed on the emperor. Not even a flex, but the emperor was, or whatever the fuck, king, whatever, however they did it back then, was very impressed because Thales predicted the height of the pyramids based off of the principles of similar triangles. But anyway, yeah, Pythagoras, that triangle dude, Illuminati confirmed. Yes, indeed. But okay, I think with that preamble out of the way, we might as well just get right into it. So I hope everybody is excited to talk about these circular ruins by Borges. So in the Discord, I put what translation I could find. Okay, actually, funny story about this book right here. Ficciones, one of my favorite books. I love it all time. Here it is right in my hands, right? The thing is, somehow I lost it like a few days ago. I lost it. Could not find or who knows when I lost it, but I was looking for it. And then so I scoured this whole fucking house. I could not find it. And then I'm using I printed out a piece of paper with like a PDF version I found, but the text is all big. I'm like, bro, I'm gonna have to be flapping the whole episode. It's not gonna be chill. Plus, I just like having a book in my hand, so I did a terrible thing and I reordered a book that I know is somewhere in this house. But sometimes that's what you gotta do. Indeed, cool cult, quite circular. So, okay, anyway. But so with that out of the way, let's get right into it. And so my game plan for this story, especially with someone like Borges, I feel like because not everyone here may have read the story as well, we're going to go through it like a first pass, talk about some of the basic, surface level themes and symbology and stuff. And then once we finish it and we understand what happens at the end, we're going to revisit it in a new light. So I think that's going to be the game plan. Speak now, forever hold your peace. In fact, even if you speak, that's the game plan anyway. But you can still speak if you'd like. But okay, so let's get right into it. The circular ruins with the epigraph. And he left off dreaming about you, ... through the looking glass, which we will return to. Okay, so this is just setting the scene. I also want to say before I go into this, partly why I wanted to do Borges is because I think he complements David Foster Wallace in an interesting way, because his writing is like DFW's, very maximalist. So like the whole I would argue first paragraph really, but it's actually just one sentence. It begins like this. No one saw him disembark in the unanimous night. No one saw the bamboo canoe sink into the sacred mud. But in a few days, there was no one who did not know that the taciturn man came from the south, and that his home had been one of those numberless villages upstream in the deeply cleft side of the mountain, where the Zend language has not been contaminated by Greek, and where leprosy is infrequent. Okay, so that was a lot, but I just, it's setting the scene. There's a lot of interesting keywords here. The sacred mud. There's a village he comes from a village from the south, the Zend language, and I looked this up. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Cool quote from the south. I looked this up too. The Zend language, it's a now dead language, but it was the original language of Zoroastrianism, which shall definitely come up later. So we're getting I think this is characteristic of Borges. There's a lot of things that you just read over. And I mean, right now we have no context. Okay, cool. But once we revisit all this, which we absolutely will, there's going to be some interesting stuff taking place. But okay, so there's this dude, right? Okay, and unanimous night, comes out the sacred mud. Okay. What is certain is that the gray man kissed the mud, climbed up the bank without pushing aside, probably without feeling, the blades which were lacerating his flesh, and crawled, nauseated and bloodstained, up to the circular enclosure, crowned with a stone tiger or horse, which sometimes was the color of flame, and now was that of ashes. Also, we're 2 sentences in, these really long, run-on-y sentences. This circle was a temple which had been devoured by ancient fires, profaned by the miasmal jungle, and whose god no longer received the homage of men. Okay, so weird scene here, right? Somebody pulls up, unanimous night, sacred mud, the gray man kissed the mud, and apparently without feeling, his legs or, his body is being lacerated by flesh, but he's crawling, nauseated and bloodstained, up to this ruin, some kind of circular temple ruins that he describes, that's crowned with a stone tiger or horse, which is already kind of an interest, tiger or horse. Those aren't really animals you would, confuse with one another. But we'll revisit that. Sometimes was the color of flame, now was of ash. So we've got, the burning flame and the symbol or just the image of ash, and which was devoured by ancient fires, whose god no longer received the homage of men. Okay, so this dude comes, he mysteriously crawls up to this temple. All right, let's go on. He was awakened by the sun high overhead, because he basically just stretches out and just takes a little nap, apparently. He was awakened by the sun high overhead. He was not astonished to find that his wounds had healed. So it's like, okay, so his wounds are healing. He knew that this temple was the place required for his invincible intent. And blah, blah, blah. And he knew that his immediate obligation was to dream. So, again, just weird, sort of surreal things happening here. It's dropped like it's just any other detail, but apparently his wounds are healed. So, that begs lots of questions in itself. And he has this invincible intent, which, by the way, I know the PDF that I put in the Discord is a different translation, and I think they're both good. I think the other one was Andrew Hurley, who was also a good translator. So I think this would just be interesting to compare the different language for those following along at home. Also, pause. I gotta let me take my tea thing out. I don't have anywhere to set it here. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Hot. All right. Okay. Okay, so he pulls up, weird stuff happening, right? All right, let's go. Oh, my hands are kind of wet. Okay, so let's get. So he knew his immediate obligation was to dream. There's no context there. It's just to dream. Okay. Toward midnight, he was awakened by the inconsolable shriek of a bird. And then we find that tracks of bare feet, some figs in a jug, warned him that the men of the region had been spying respectfully on his sleep, soliciting his protection or afraid of his magic. He felt a chill of fear and sought out a sepulchral niche in the dilapidated wall where he concealed himself among unfamiliar leaves. So for one, we're getting more of Borges' style, just these crazy, big words, these long sentences, very mystical coded language as well. But it's okay, so weird, right? Weird things are happening. He just goes to this. He crawls to this circular ruins, which is just here. Who knows where he came from? His obligation was to dream. He wakes up and there's just provisions. They just kind of appear. Everything he needs. Food, water, whatever. It's just there. It's like, okay, we're just taking that as so again, the very surreal sort of nature of things, because it's not like this weird thing. It's not like, whoa, where'd this come from? It's just sort of told as just matter of factly, like it's any old other detail. The purpose which guided him was not impossible, though supernatural. He wanted to dream a man. He wanted to dream him in minute entirety and impose him on reality. So that's, obviously big little passage there, because this guy, he has an invincible intent, so he's clearly got up to something. He's weirdly, kind of not upset by not right. By now he's not obsessed, but he has this fixation. Apparently he just keeps sleeping, and so we find out his goal is to dream a man. This magic project had exhausted the entire expanse of his mind. If someone had asked him his name or to relate some event of his former life, he would not have been able to give an answer. So it's just this so consumes him, apparently, that he couldn't, if you asked him his name or to relate some event of his former life, he would not be able to give an answer. So it's he doesn't have apparently any memory or even of something like his name, allegedly, right? So the whole thing here is very mysterious. What's good, Frank Ocean Manager? Good to see you here, bro. So, all right, okay, we learned he's apparently got a mission to dream a man. So at first, his dreams were chaotic. Then, in a short while, they became dialectic in nature. The stranger dreamed that he was in the center of a circular amphitheater, which was more or less the burnt temple. Clouds of taciturn students filled the tiers of seats. The faces of the farthest ones hung at a distance of many centuries and as high as the stars, but their features were completely precise. The man lectured his pupils on anatomy, cosmography, and magic. So I do want to pause here for a quick second because we're seeing the sort of dream trajectory, like this whole arc that's about to take place, take form. In the beginning, the dreams were chaotic, and I just have to say, because I got all this mythology next to me, a lot of the cosmogonies, just in all things, like, whether it's the creation of man, but particularly the creation of universe, it always begins in chaos. In the beginning, there was chaos, some variation of that. So it's interesting that, yeah, I agree, for Frank Ocean Manager, that it is an interesting visual, because we've got this amphitheater, so it starts out chaotic and then in a short while it becomes dialectic, and this reminds me of just the Socratic dialogue, like that whole method. And a lot of times, and look, this is cool because in my history of mathematics class we're learning about people like Pythagoras and just a bunch of the Greek philosophers, but they kind of had schools where, for instance, Pythagoras is somebody who would not preach, but give lectures very much in this style. I can't say if it was in an amphitheater necessarily, but he goes up, there's people watching him, students, pupils, and they listen to someone like Pythagoras, and then it's dialectic. And then there's more, so I'll come back to this point because it'll be relevant soon, but all right, and then, weird images, right? This is that sort of dream logic where it's like the faces of the farthest ones hung at a distance of many centuries and as high as the stars. So like you said, Frank Ocean Manager, that image is just a really strong one. But their features were completely precise. The aspect of dreams where there is a sort of lack of dimensionality, or just normal relations in space and time just don't make sense. Things can happen in an instant, things can be simultaneously true, or you could have people as high as the stars and yet their face are completely precise, like that illogical aspect of dreams. But he lectured his pupils on anatomy, cosmography, and magic, the triple threat right there. And so he's giving his lectures, and then he senses a growing intelligence. After 9 or 10 nights, he understood with a certain bitterness that he could expect nothing from those pupils who accepted his doctrine passively, but that he could expect something from those who occasionally dared to oppose him. The former group, although worthy of love and affection, could not ascend to the level of individuals. The latter pre-existed to a slightly greater degree. So, lots of interesting stuff there. So the thing with the Pythagoras, which I want to bring in here, because he's basically saying, there's most of the pupils are just accepting everything passively. They're for lack of a better word, intellectual sheep, in the sense that they're not questioning anything. They're just sort of taking it all in, and you can imagine that they just regurgitate it all out without any critical thinking or, anything like that. But, there are, as he says, he could expect something from those who occasionally dared to oppose him. So basically those who exercise free thinking, and this is something we can return to as we come back and do our second Passover. But yeah, I mean, that's just an interesting interpretation. I think you could totally make that analogy with society. There's people who just kind of passively, learn or just passively live life in general, without questioning anything. And then there's those who they do, dare to oppose, and they do dare to think, and they have, well, it's kind of an interesting claim. He says they pre-exist to a slightly greater degree. And I'm reminded, classic Socrates quote. I said, wait, what is it? The unexamined life is not worth living. So so the examined life, therefore, has a bit of pre-existence, to a slightly greater degree. So yeah, just, spitting facts. Love that. And this is all, also, we're still in this, world of his mission is to dream a man, which, classic, insane, mystical, surreal Borges premise, dreaming a man in its entirety to impose upon reality. So that's what all of this is, right? So far, a lot of this story, in some sense, is taking place within this man's dream. So one afternoon, and now afternoons were also given over to sleep. Now he was only awake for a couple of hours at daybreak. So he's really, investing himself into this process. He dismissed the vast illusory student body for good and kept only one pupil. He was a taciturn, sallow boy, at times intractable, and whose sharp features resembled those of the dreamer. Okay, interesting tidbit there. So, the man that he is dreaming seems to resemble himself, right? Okay, interesting stuff. We might have to come back to that. And yeah, so right, he just keeps the one pupil, which I forget if I mentioned that. I think I started saying this and then got distracted. But the like for instance with Pythagoras, he gives these lectures to people, and there's a whole phase in the beginning where you are like bi-direction. You don't, this ain't a dialect. You're not going back and forth. But if you show enough promise, at some point you get initiated into the closer realm. Like you get promoted basically, and you become part of like the Pythagoras crew, and you can have more interaction and stuff. But basically, first there's a period of just pure learning. But it sounds like this is somebody who, if we're taking the analog with like the Greek schools of thought and how they did philosophy back then, this is somebody who will have now been initiated past those first rites and will have been accepted into a sort of like secret society. In this case, the sort of secret communion of the man and the dreamer. So now he's focusing all his efforts on this chosen one in some sense. Yeah, tons of foreshadowing. Frank Ocean, I don't know if you missed this part, but we're going to go through the whole story and then come back so that like you get the raw experience of it, and then we can break down all the, the foreshadowing. That's the great thing about Borges. Like, to anyone watching here, we're telling you explicitly there's foreshadowing, something's going to happen, but you may or may not see it coming. You definitely won't see it coming to the fullest degree that it's coming. But, even when it's just, he still just is able to weave such a great narrative and stuff. But so one day the man emerged from his sleep as if from a vicious desert. He looked at the useless afternoon light, which he immediately confused with the dawn, and understood that he had not dreamed. This is also the beauty of Borges. You get something new every time. I think a thing that pops up pretty frequently in this story is like that ambiguity, almost like that twilight, or at least that mistaking, right? He sees like this gray, or the useless afternoon light, which he confused with dawn, like where the two aspects, dawn and dusk, twilight, where the two meet. But so he had not dreamed. Okay, damn, what happened? Our protagonist here has hit a snag. So hold on, let me get a little sip break. When I do my videos, I'll be taking hella sip breaks, but I edit them out, so you guys are we're chilling. Knowing the ending, I wonder if his initiated pupil looking like him is an allusion to dreaming himself into being. Yeah, so we'll get back to that for show. Okay, so he had not dreamed, and blah 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 blah, and there's this little line too: tears of anger burned his old eyes. So it's like, okay, that's our, at least like in my translation, and is like the first mention of, so this apparently is an older dude, like this is an old man, I guess, in some sense, and he's kind of referred to as like a magician almost, so that makes sense. But it's like, okay, now we're getting a feel for the man himself, right? So he understood that modeling the incoherent and vertiginous matter of which dreams are composed was the most difficult task that a man could undertake. Much more difficult than weaving a rope out of sand or coining the faceless wind. So, I just think that's, all of these are impossible. And, but it's like, this was way harder than weaving a rope out of sand or coining this impossible task is way harder than the other impossible tasks. But yeah, and then he basically kind of has like this period, for whatever reason that happens where he's unable to dream. And so he undergoes this period of rest, almost of incubation in some way. Actually, come to think about it, we could draw a parallel with like, the incubation, gestation of giving birth to an actual person. There is like that period where the idea, the thing which is to be born is gestating and coming to life. So that that's one interpretation too. And I'll just say this, because this one doesn't matter, but a lot of ways people choose to interpret this story is that it's the process of art. This man that he's dreaming, right? This life, this individual, this being that he's dreaming. There, one interpretation of this story, just to kind of plant the seed here, is that it is analogous to coming up with a piece of art. It is a piece of yourself that you dream, right? When you're writing fiction, you are essentially imagining, dreaming a whole world. And so the man that, him dreaming a man is the equivalent of, coming up with, creating a piece of art. Love that line. Weaving a rope out of sand is so. Yeah, he has so many just phrases and mystical symbols, that just really resonate. Oftentimes, even just at like a unconscious level. Like someone like Borges and Kafka, to me, I've described them before as You can read them and it's hidden, and you can't articulate why at first. You have to figure out after the fact like why, but it just immediately has that resonance. So there's this period of rest that goes on for, who knows how long necessarily, but he's trying to he's roaming the jungle and stuff to try and wear his energy out, and he's just kind of swearing the whole thing off for a little bit, abandoning the idea, at least for a bit. So, okay. And then before resuming his task, he waited until, because again, he's just kind of like waiting out this random period of insomnia, which with the art interpretation would be like, writer's block. You can't sleep. You're not able to, interact with the thing which you're creating at the level that you want to, in this case with the dreaming, but he has insomnia, which would be the equivalent of writer's block or something like that. So he waited until the moon's disk was perfect. Then in the afternoon, he purified himself in the waters of the river, worshipped the planetary gods, pronounced the prescribed symbols of a mighty name, and went to sleep. He dreamed almost immediately with his heart throbbing. Okay, couple of things. So one, there's a very ritualistic aspect to this, right? We're waiting till it's a full moon, which has all sorts of significance with, mythical rites and things like that. But on top of that, he purified himself in the waters of the river. To me, that's just like a symbol of a baptism. Whatever it is that's plugging up his creative energies with dreaming the man, on this fateful night, with this mythically symbolic, the moon is out. He washes himself with the water. He baptizes himself essentially and pronounces the word of a mighty name. God pronounced the syllables of a mighty name and went to sleep. So, some ritual has taken place here, which is going to mark a turning point for the man's goal here of dreaming another man and imposing him onto reality. So, my translation, by the way, here says he dreamed almost immediately with his heart throbbing. And I know the one I posted on the Discord was like he dreamed almost immediately, and basically he dreamed of a actual heart, right? So just, there's a few interesting translation things that I want to revisit. So he dreamed that it was warm, secret, about the size of a clenched fist, and of a garnet color within the penumbra of a human body, as yet without face or sex. During 14 lucid nights, he dreamt of it with meticulous love. So it's like this image of a heart, the size of a clenched fist. And this is actually a good example, because like I've mentioned before on the channel, I don't really picture things very much when I read, but I do get, occasionally when there's some really good lines, I'll get like kind of a flash. And, this idea of the heart that's beating within the penumbra of a human body, as yet without face or sex. That line, for whatever reason, I do get like this image, this faceless, featureless, raw form of a body, but now we have like, this beating heart. Which he is, dreaming of for 14 lucid nights with meticulous love. So 14, we'll come back to that because, there is actually some pretty interesting stuff with that. But you're right. Okay, so over this period of 14 days, and this is where he's having real success, right? There was like the amphitheater of dream figures that he was lecturing to. He singles this one out, but then he hits a total block, and he's not able to make any progress. But I think I'm good. But just to triple check. So, okay, all right, he's going on. In the Gnostic cosmogonies, demiurges fashion a red atom who cannot stand. As clumsy, crude, and elemental as this atom of dust was, the atom of dreams forged by the wizard's nights. So, he's talking about... Okay, hold on, let's see. Why do you think the heart is the first thing he created with this new approach? Interesting. I think the heart is seen historically as like the most vital organ. The heart oftentimes represents the soul. And, like in modern understanding, that's probably like more like the brain. But for time immemorial, and, even throughout the modern day, you feel it in your heart. The heart is the symbol of essentially, your essence, your soul. So I think that's one answer to it. it does make sense too. Like, when you think of life, what is like, imagine a baby that's being gestated. One of the first things that happen, the heart starts beating. So that's, just like one of the first, and this whole thing is still very rough around the edges, right? It doesn't, like, it's faceless, it's sexless. I imagine almost like just this gray, featureless body, but that heart is, the thing that's going to start pumping the body with that vital essence, which is life. Blah, 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 blah. And yeah, so, and then he describes it, we're gonna, foreshadowing, this Gnostic cosmogony fashioning a red atom who cannot stand. That is a classic, that's a classic theme motif in mythology, is, fashioning a human out of dirt or clay or various other things. So we'll return to that point. But, as clumsy as that original red atom was, so too was this man who, it's essentially his atom, right? It's his dream atom. Oh, wait, best viewer. Oh, yeah. Whoa. Okay, hold on. My thing just went. How do I, shit. How do you, okay, hold on. Oh, I think I got it. Wait. Block. I can block. I think that's the equivalent of ban. Oh, ban. Okay. You banned. Done. Cooked. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that heads up. How do I can't. Oh, okay. Stream is back. Wait, you said stream is back? Was it gone? Or no? Okay, but either way, they're banned. Okay. Oh, wait, the stream went off? Are you for real? Wait, I was just going off. Okay, where did we last leave? That's crazy. I don't know why. Couldn't tell you why. It's looking good over here. Wow. Okay. Wait, where did we just leave off? Because I wasn't cooking, but I was preheating the oven. What was the last thing we were talking about? I don't know why that happened. I guess let me know if that happens again. I guess you can't let me know because it's banned or it crashed. But okay, so yeah. Okay, I'll just start back up with the okay. We were still the heart. Oh man, pick back up where you talking about the heart passage. Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm hopefully I answered your question because I totally gave a whole ass answer. The idea that the heart is like the first, or when you think of a baby, that's, or just the development of like a child in the womb, that the fundamental, the marker of what makes something alive is that heartbeat. Okay, so we did hear that. Am I repeating that? But even like you got someone on a fucking medicine or heart rate monitor. Someone's like deathly sick. What happens? How do you know when they're dead? The heart flatlines. It's just it's a symbol in so many ways. The rhythmic beating, and the rhythmic beating you could even say is circular. It's anything that follows a rhythm can be mapped that way as a cycle. But okay, so we were on the, okay, did we say this? In the Gnostic cosmogonies, demiurges fashion a red atom who cannot stand. As clumsy, crude, and elemental as this atom of dust was, the atom of dreams forged by the wizard's knights. Did we go through that? Because I just did a whole ass thing. But either way, foreshadowing. We are going to talk about that. That's a big motif in mythology in general, is the formation of a being from dirt or clay or things of that nature. So, and he's talking about this Gnostic cosmogony, right? It's like this clumsy, clunky form of the first being, and this is the same way that it is for the essentially the dream atom of our protagonist here. It's got the crude parts, right? It's got the organs and the skeletons, but I'm almost imagining like a Frankenstein-like monster that's kind of like like the daemon that's getting its bearings. How a deer when a deer first is born, they're kind of like low on or they have bad motor functioning. Holy shit, I'm explaining this poorly, but you understand. It's a crude conception of this dream, man. So, yeah, okay, and then we are going to revisit this part. That there's a lot of interesting stuff there, right? The Adam was created of dust, and so just keep that in mind, and we'll revisit some of these mythologies and go through a little comparison. So one afternoon, the man almost destroyed his entire work, but then changed his mind. Parentheses, it would have been better had he destroyed it. Interesting. So he threw himself at the feet of the effigy, which was perhaps a tiger or perhaps a colt, and implored its unknown help. Right. So he basically reaches that breaking point, which again I think is representative of the artistic process. There's highs and lows, and at this point he's given what he feels like is everything to this project, which has consumed his mind and his life so much that, as it said earlier, if you would ask him something, he wouldn't be able to remember his name or any past event. So much is this mystic task consuming him. But he reaches a point, right, where he's throwing himself down at this circular ruins, which he arrived at in the first place, right? And it has this figure which is perhaps a tiger or a colt, and implored its unknown help. That evening at twilight, he dreamt of the statue. He dreamt it was alive, tremulous. It was not an atrocious bastard of a tiger and a colt, but at the same time, these two fire creatures, and also a bull arose in a storm. This multiple god revealed to him that his earthly name was Fire, and that in this circular temple, and in others like it, people had once made sacrifices to him and worshipped him, and that he would magically animate the dreamed phantom in such a way that all creatures, except Fire itself and the dreamer, would believe it to be a man of flesh and blood. So, very interesting passage there. So he has this dream of, and I love this too. Borges is doing a great job of capturing like that dream logic, where it's a tiger or a horse or a colt, he says, but at the same time it's these things, but also a bull, a rose, and a storm, which are just completely disparate things. And it reminds me of in dreams how you can have these things that are just totally incompatible with one another, but they're somehow true. It's like, I'm at a gymnasium, but somehow it's also my room, or like there's this person and it's like my mom, but somehow it's also like my teacher, like things like that. Also, okay, can you guys, am I still good? Just making sure. If it crashed once, I just want to make sure it didn't crash again. Let me can I check I think I can look at my thing. I'm just check. Oh, it's gonna make me fucking sign up. Okay, you're chilling. Okay, thank you. Just making sure. I don't want to make sure. So again, that dream logic, it's somehow a tiger colt, but then, even in the beginning, I pointed out, how is it that it's either it's a tiger or a horse or a colt? Those aren't, you wouldn't typically mix those up. So that was already present in the beginning, and it's like the idea almost of like this chimera. It's like this hybrid organism, this hybrid creature. But yet he says, it wasn't just that, it was also a bull, a rose, and a storm. So honestly, I haven't thought there's a ton in this passage I want to break down. But, I haven't looked too much into the symbology of the bull, rose, storm. So if anyone has thoughts as we visit that, I would love to know those. But so this multiple god revealed, right, its name was Fire, capital F Fire, which was, I'll even just say, that's one of the primary deities of Zoroastrianism, or like, symbol. There's the fire god, there's Agni, the fire god. I think that's Hinduism actually. But, fire as a symbol is present in all these different religions. And he says, in this circular temple, people had once made sacrifices and worshipped him. And that, so basically this god, Fire, which is like this manifold god of all these different forms, essentially says, I will magically animate the dreamed phantom, that final spark of life that's needed. Spark, by the way, fire, right? And the only ones that who would know were Fire itself and the dreamer. Everybody else would believe it to be a man of flesh and blood. So he commanded that once this man had been instructed in all the rites, that he should be sent to the other ruined temple, whose pyramids were still standing downstream, so that some voice would glorify him in that deserted edifice. In the dream of the man that dreamed, the dreamed one awoke. Just a fire sentence, I wonder what it's like for those reading at home with the different translation, sorry, I burped. How that went, but I love that. In the dream of the man that dreamed, the dreamed one awoke. It's beautiful. Again, we're getting into that circular sort of regression theme already, but Yeah, so it finally happens. He's visited by this mysterious god after prostrating himself at this mysterious circular ruins, and so then it happens, right? At long last. So, and the basically the man comes alive in his dreams, and so as this is happening too, there's this little tidbit, he, on the pretext of pedagogical necessity, each day he increased the number of hours dedicated to dreaming. He also remade the right shoulder, which was somewhat defective. It's just funny. At times he was disturbed by the impression that all this had already happened. Like, okay, getting a little bit of a deja vu here. That's interesting, especially with everything that's been going on. But gradually, the dream man began accustoming him, the dream man, to reality. Once he ordered him to place a flag on a faraway peak. The next day, the flag was fluttering on the peak. He tried other analogous experiments, each time more audacious. With a certain bitterness, he understood that his son was ready to be born and perhaps impatient. Also, just as we're saying, the foreshadowing, and I just the obvious image to me of, the God, like in the Christian sense, creating Jesus, sending his, one and only son onto the earth, giving God itself, right, this body and form in the world of space and time. And, so his son was ready to be born and perhaps impatient. That night he kissed him for the first time and sent him off to the other temple, whose ruins were turning white downstream across many miles of inextricable jungle and marshes. And it's like, okay, this is, it's sounding a little familiar in a way, right? It's like, okay, so he's sending him upstream to another temple. And before doing this, and so that his son should never know that he was a phantom, so that he should think himself a man like any other, he destroyed in him all memories of his years of apprenticeship. So the man who's dreaming the man has, done all this labor and work to create this dream man, and he's almost as a sort of act of grace, so that this man thinks that he's just like every other man. He destroys all his memory of the years of apprenticeship. And so and it happens basically. He gets his victory, and it says his victory and peace became blurred with boredom. In the twilight times of dusk and dawn, like I kind of very badly articulated earlier, that's what I was talking about. He would prostrate himself before the stone figure, perhaps imagining his unreal son carrying out identical rites in other circular ruins downstream. So again, he's still honoring, kind of praying, carrying out these rites to the circular ruin, and he's imagining his son doing the same thing downstream. And then at some point, right, and I love this, after a certain time, which some chroniclers prefer to compute in years and others in decades, it's like, it has that mythical aspect where it's like there's always a couple different versions of it. Some say it's decades, some say it was years. But let's see. 2 oarsmen awoke him at midnight. He could not see their faces, but they spoke to him of a charmed man in a temple of the north, capable of walking on fire without burning himself. And this is, of course, his son. Note, he can remove the memories independent of the training. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So he hears that there's this man up north, where he sent his son, that is able to walk on fire. And he realizes, fire was the only one who knew his son to be a phantom. When he had that dream, transformative experience that night with the manifold God fire, it was just between them. And it's like, okay, what that translates to is that he's not dying by the fire. So this memory, which at first calmed him, ended by tormenting him. He feared lest his son should meditate on this abnormal privilege and by some means find out that he was a mere simulacrum. Not to be a man, to be a projection of another man's dreams. What an incomparable humiliation. What madness, right? Okay, great passage. We'll come back to that. But so he's just fearing for his son, right? He sent his son, did all this to make sure that he would, as a good parent would, he's sacrificing the ultimate, all the memories in some sense that he had with his child, so that his dream child, organism, whatever, could live its life fully. And now he's still fretting over him. He's like, he's worried that with the fire that his son's essentially going to get found out. So, his okay, so he's kind of fretting about this, but his misgivings ended abruptly, but not without certain forewarnings. First, after a long drought, a remote cloud as light as a bird appeared on a hill. Then, toward the south, the sky took on the rose color of a leopard's gums. Then came clouds of smoke which rusted the metal of the nights. And then afterwards came the panic-stricken flight of wild animals. So all this is happening. Also, I have to stop right here because what I had just asked about earlier, right? It was also a bull, a rose, and a storm. That's in the earlier dream. He says like this god was somehow also all three of those things. Well, come to find out, the sky took on the rose color of a leopard's gum. So there's the rose, and this whole thing is a storm. What's coming, right? After a long drought, a remote cloud appeared on a hill, and it's this vast storm. And I have an idea about the bull. Actually, we'll come back to that, but. So there's that for foreshadowing and interpretation. This god, which takes the form of the rose, the storm, all that other stuff, is making its appearance. And then what happens? So there's this panic-stricken flight of wild animals, for what had happened many centuries before was repeating itself. The ruins of the sanctuary of the god of fire was destroyed by fire. And what happens is this huge inferno comes and destroys the circular ruins that this man has just been praying to. So all this is happening, right? Concentric fire licking the walls. I love that. The idea of the concentric circle and it being lit on fire. Just I really licking the walls. Love that image. And so for a moment he thought of taking refuge in the water, but then he understood that death was coming to crown his old age and absolve him from his labor. So he's like, you know what? This is a sign here. What he does is he walked toward the sheets of flame. And then, of course, critically here, banger last passage. They did not bite his flesh. They caressed him and flooded him without heat or combustion. With relief, with humiliation, with terror, he understood that he also was an illusion, that someone else was dreaming him. And it's like, boom, banger. That's the full circle, right? That's the circular ruins. So... okay, well, there's a ton of stuff to talk about, but I'm curious, everyone out in the comments, in chat, I'm curious what your interpretations, your first time reading this, or just hearing it now for the first time, any impressions you had. It's hard for me to get back into the first headspace of when I first read this, but I mean, I love that ending. In many ways, it's almost a cliche, right? It's like, turns out he was, well, it's not even that, right? Actually, because the cliche is like, it was all a dream, and that's true, it was all a dream, but it's like he is the dream of another man, right? It's this infinite regression. He dreams a man into existence, and we just have to assume, especially with this scene with the fire, that he himself was born of some other, who knows, right? Who's the original? And that that of course begs the question: who is the original dreamer? It could just be an infinite regression, right? Turtles all the way down, as they say. But if he's being dreamed, who's the one dreaming him, and so on ad infinitum. Story is a masterpiece, bro. Love that. Strikes me as the Ouroboros. Exactly. No. Ouroboros is on point because that is the symbol of life and death. And that's why it's an endless cycle, right? Life feeds upon death. For life to exist, death must also, life is contingent upon death, and that whole cycle is represented in the circle. And then this is, especially since we're talking about life, it is, it's the creation of life, but in this endless series. Yeah, so it is a little different, Cool Cult, in the sense that it's almost like a spiral. One man is dreaming another man is dreaming another man. And of course, the whole time as you're reading this, there might be hints, but you are also, right, you are fooled just like everybody else. It's only between fire and the man that they know that their son is in fact, actually a phantasm. And as we're reading this, there's nothing to, obviously there's weird and surreal things going on and you might have a hint of it, but the way that the story is told it's also kind of inexplicable to you, right? You also just assume this is a man who's got this, crazy mystical mission that he's on, but it's still, the base reality is you assume that he's a man, right? The second read is better than first. Cool bit about the The story, yeah. So we will. So I wanted to go. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but there are some important parts that I think, yeah, knowing how the story takes place, take on a whole new meaning. But I also just think this whole thing. I forget who said it the other day, but it gives me vibes of the numinous. Like when I'm reading this, there's something you get a feeling, like a vague ambient feeling of like, mysticism. Something deeper is lurking here, and it's just because you have all these symbols and the language and everything like that. And some of these stuff, I hear a critique of Borges where it's basically people just say, like, he just throws a bunch of symbols in and it doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of like gobbledygook, but it's really not, because if you break it down, they have total correspondence to the theme, and as everybody was saying, the foreshadowing here is on point. So, oh wait, hold on, this is still pinned. Let me unpin that. Okay, sorry about that. Ton of stuff, yeah. So let's start with the very first passage. This is what I wanted to talk about. No one saw him disembark in the unanimous night. No one saw the bamboo canoe sink into the sacred mud, and blah, 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 blah. So also this image of, the unanimous night. It's like, when did this actually begin? I think this whole beginning totally reads like a dream to me. It's like he just kind of appears out of this nothingness, and the sacred mud. So let's get straight to it. I alluded to that too. And he has the part later where he talks about, as rough and crude as the Gnostic creation of Adam was, so too was his man. And so if we view the protagonist of the story as also being born and imposed onto the world, right? Just as he sends his dream man upstream, he apparently is just coming upstream, and he's coming up from the sacred mud. So first off too, this is a bit of a stretch, but the thing is, it kind of works. The bamboo canoe. Y'all will feel me on this. The canoe is low-key vaginal. It's low-key. I said, let's just be real, gang. Freud was onto something. The canoe is vaguely vaginal. So it's like he emerges from this canoe into this mud, right? The sacred mud. And as I've mentioned, that's a classic motif across so many religions. Man being formed out of clay, mud, dirt, whatever, what have you, right? Blood clots is another one that pops up, for instance, in like Native American mythology. But I wanted to go through just a couple of examples. So this is from Bullfinch's mythology with Prometheus, who, by the way, is chat. Let me know in the comments. The god of fire. But so, okay, he's talking about Prometheus and the creation of all creatures. And this, again, Bullfinch's mythology, Greek mythology, Prometheus. But a nobler animal was wanted, and man was made, because they just made all the, animals. But man is, the big one. It is not known whether the Creator made him of divine materials, or whether in the earth, so lately separated from heaven, there lurked some still heavenly seeds. Prometheus took some of this earth, and kneading it up with water, made man in the image of the gods. He gave him an upright stature, so that while other animals turn their faces downward and look to the earth, he raises to his head his to the heavens, his gaze is on the stars. So, the sacred mud. Here is him. Here is the man being born, because now we know he was also a dream being. And he even kisses the mud, right? And I think he's described as like a gray man. So all of this is very dreamlike from the beginning. And in hindsight, it's so obvious. But, he's born into the sacred mud. He kisses the mud. Oh, yeah, I wanted to just quickly. I like it. I think it's cool to see how this really does appear in so many different mythologies. So, yeah, okay, all right. So this is from Indian Legends of the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, kisses the mud and the sun. You're right. Yep, absolutely. As he sends him off, exactly. So I'm skipping here, but this is the creation of the Klamath world from the Native American legends. On the 5th morning after the sun called, Kamush gathered the dry bones and put them in a sack. Then he followed the trail of the sun to the edge of the world. As he followed, he threw away the dry bones, 2 at a time. He threw them on the mountains, in the valleys, on the seashore. Some of the dry bones became the people of the Chipmunks. Some people became Maidu, the Indians. Others became the Klamath Indians, and thus were people created. And honestly, this isn't even the best example because it's like bones, but it's like the way it's typically told is it's like it's the bones, you know, hitting the earth. It's the second that they hit the earth and make contact with the earth that, you know, the people are that they're born. And then what book is that? This is Indian Legends of the Pacific Northwest. I got it at like a random like almost like a not a book sale, like, you know, like when libraries or things like that have like those huge industrial sales. Random ass book, but honestly fire. Tons of good shit in here. And then this one's like super quick. I was trying to find a more involved one, but The Origin of Man, and this is from African mythology. It's just a quick sentence here. Obatala formed humanity from earth, and then there is another god, Olodumare, who breathes life into them. But I mean, all of these motifs are found, you know, the breathing of life. There's a version of the Greek myth which goes like that. I think Prometheus forms them. There's also another version where Prometheus throws bones behind his back, and once they hit the earth, they become human, right? So anyway, those are just a few examples of mythology, and they weren't even the best. It's just kind of what I had on hand. But, you know, African mythology, Native American, ancient Greek, you know, and there's so many more where that, you know, the first being was fashioned for reconnection successful. Can you guys hear me? It says the connection was... Hold up. Okay, I think we're back. Yeah? It says welcome back to the chat, or welcome to the chat room. I think we good. Okay, we're back. Okay, sorry guys. I really don't know what to... This hasn't happened on the other streams, and my internet looks good, but... Okay, well, once again, I was yapping. But, so I forget, okay, can I just ask, sorry, where did we leave off at again? Also, it's hot, bro. I'm taking this thing off. But, yeah, well, where did we leave off? I think I was talking about, let's see. Well, definitely the, yeah. Okay, so okay, you guys heard the mythology stuff, right? Where I busted out all the different... yeah, thank you. When I went through the different myths and we heard like the creation of man from the earth. I think we got through that. Okay, sorry. I'm just making sure we good. Okay. So, okay, my bad. Okay, we get to the part 2 where there's this weird stuff, right? Like where he's waking up with the wounds, but apparently he's not astonished to find that they had completely healed, and that's very much like dream logic, where there's these things that happen and they're totally absurd, but you just accept them as matter of fact. And then he also says, he had this invincible intent that he knew he needed to dream a man, right? His immediate obligation was to dream, and where I think I got cut off, at least in part, was where a dream that I had where, and it's a dream that stuck with me, where I'm on all fours and I'm on a beach, like an island. I know I'm on an island. See, that's the thing also with dreams. It's like, it's not like anything indicated that necessarily, but I just know in the dream, right? I'm on an island, and like half of me is on the sand and half of me is on the water, and I just know that I need to like traverse and get to the other side of the island, and I don't need to go on to the other aspects of it. But just, I think we've all had experiences with that in the dream, where it's just you have something that you are doing and that you need to do. And so he has that same thing, right? And so he knew that his immediate obligation was to dream. We're not giving it any context. He just knows. And then also there's this the aspect too where he wakes up and he finds out that people, just these provisions appeared, and like there's like footsteps and stuff, but these, makes no sense really. We see he gives the answer to it. It's like, oh, it must be because they either feared him or they sympathized with him, but like it's just random that all these different goodies basically come just out of nowhere. He just accepts it as totally normal and then goes about his business. So, and okay, just a quick, it's a very subtle point, but I think it was interesting. This, so I know because I read the other translation, but there's a part where the stranger dreamed that he was in the center of a circular amphitheater, which was somehow the burnt temple. That's what it says in this one. My translation says more or less, but the translation that I read was somehow. And I'm going to do a little tangent here, because I've been doing some research with this other podcast. I won't get into it, but they have they have a ton of data on dreams. People submit dreams to them, and so they have this database of thousands of dreams, and I've been helping them do some data analysis. And one of the top words that pops up, because I'm doing a word cloud, one of the most frequent words in all of dreams is the word somehow, and I think it's really characteristic because it doesn't make sense, right? Like, it's true. You don't know how it's possibly true. So, somehow. So he's in this amphitheater, which was somehow also the burnt temple. Again, it's like when you're kind of like in two places at once. But anyway, minor point. I thought it was interesting just because the other translation says somehow, but this one says more or less. And obviously that's a huge difference. But, so yeah, and then he's going through, he's lecturing people, and then this is just trippy too when you think about it, because it's like he has these students that he's dialecting towards, and it's just the inner complexity of the dream. I don't know if anyone here has had this. I personally haven't actually, but I know it's a common phenomenon where you have a dream, like you're in a dream, but within that dream you also have another kind of dream, right? Or there's something nested within the dream itself, and the person he ends up selecting, right, was a taciturn, sallow boy, at times intractable, and whose sharp features resembled those of the dreamer. So, I mean, Borges, for one, is obsessed with mirrors in all his literature, but like this is like, the mirror image. The person that he's dreaming is also created in his image. Come to think about it, that's absolutely, the nature of God. And I think even, with the Gnosticism stuff, I can't remember exactly where it is, but God creates his son, Jesus, in his image. It was the myth I just read, the Prometheus myth. Right? Prometheus made it in the image of the gods as well. So, here is this man who is dreaming of a person who ends up being his main pupil, his main candidate, and the features resemble themselves of the dreamer. He was fashioned in the dreamer's own image, which of course is just a total parallel with God and the creation of humanity. So, and then, that was an interesting detail. Tears of anger burned his old eyes. So he's still, old in some sense, which is just gives us a new perspective on the dreamer. But apparently, it seems like he was born if we're assuming in the beginning of the book, when he arrives upstream, he's almost born already as a man. I mean, it's trippy to think about, but he apparently doesn't have any memories too, right? It so consumed him that if you asked him his name or to relate some event of his former life, he would not have been able to give an answer. Which is absolutely, related to, it just shows he forgot his memory. Just like the man had also sent his son upstream and gave him the gift of erasing all his memory so that he would think he's an actual man, so too does our protagonist. His memory has been erased too. He could not name an event, if you had asked him, he could not name an event of his former life. And it's under the guise of it's because he's so obsessed with this mission, but in light of what we learn, it's absolutely because, or the big interpretation is that it's because he too has had his memory wiped, just like he did with the son that he created. So let's see. It's also interesting too to me, like the this period of rest that the man has, and all these different things. It's like, I wonder. Well, there's two versions, I guess. Like, one could be that he actually is born and he's totally independent, or it could be that he himself is still being dreamed by the person dreaming him. But I wanted to talk about, so when he dreams the heart, right? And I said that during 14 lucid nights he dreamt it with meticulous love. And it's just like, I think Borges is very intentional with his stuff, right? And so 14, I was just kind of curious, okay, what's the symbology there? So I wanted to pull up a couple things, but real quick, I see a chat. I find it interesting that his son was unaffected by fire before he was. Yeah, that's true, right? Because he basically realizes that he himself is a phantasm because it happened to his son first, and he just feels compelled to also just walk in the fire. But yeah, right, that's true. Okay, but 14. So okay, the things I did look into this. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna try sharing my screen. So okay, this should look really weird right now. And then here's the Discord. But I wanted to show the Temperance Tarot card. Can you? I can't tell if you guys can see this because I'm sharing my. I don't have a dual monitor, but I'm pretty sure you can see this. Let me know in the chat. I'll just check real quick. But this is the Temperance card, which is 14. Okay, yeah, we can see. Cool. So I was just curious, and there's a ton of stuff you could do here, but it's supposed to be, we have like this sort of angel of life. You see that one of the feet is in the water, right? It's almost like just how the man sort of baptized himself too, because that's what happened right before he purifies himself in the water. And there's two cups, right? And the water is flowing from one to the other. And it's interesting because if you really look at it, it almost looks like it's flowing upward from the bottom cup to the top cup, but also, vice versa from the top cup to the bottom cup. And it's just, like this idea of one cup giving life unto another cup, filling another cup. And then we have the, this I haven't done a full, breakdown. I just think there's things with this card that are, really interesting. And we got the angel, which, he's constantly sort of like praying to the gods. And there's the triangle, which, hey, Pythagorean's theorem, am I right, gang? Because we were talking about Pythagoras. So anyway, I thought that was interesting just to bring up. And then, okay, here, wait, let me, okay, we back. So I thought that was just kind of like a fun little tidbit, and it feels right. And also, you know what? I'm not gonna lie, I do not know what temperance means. I think it's like abstinence, but let me look up temperance. Moderation and self-control, particularly in regards to alcohol, moderation or voluntary self-restraint. So this comes right after the period where he was voluntarily restraining himself. Like he takes many days where he just gives the project up. It's almost like he was too obsessed with it, right? Because that's what happens. He's like, he even calls that whole first period a period of delirium because he's just so adamantly dreaming. So maybe what he needed was a little bit of temperance. The book Jung and Tarot has really good tarot breakdowns, though I don't know much about tarot in general. He's incredibly disciplined. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with tarot either, but I want to get more so. And a book on Jung and tarot sounds super good. But even just, looking at it, I think that kind of stuff should be accessible to us all. We don't need there is no core meaning to those things. So looking at it, especially with respect to this story, is interesting. And another thing I found is that 14 is related to the doubling of divine perfection, because 7 is the big godly number, right? It took 7 days, 7 nights for God to create the earth. Like, that's just found everywhere. 7 is the 7 days in the week. I guess I just said that, but that's like the godly number, right? And so 14, like I said, is the doubling of divine perfection. And that's exactly what's happening in this story, right? There's a doubling of being, doubling of consciousness. This man is dreaming up another man. So, and then we have this period of 14. So I don't know if Borges was doing all that. I don't read too much into the numerology stuff, but it does fit really well, right? Like that doubling of being, that's a great fit here. And then so next year he's talking about the Gnostic cosmogonies as well, and the thing with Gnosticism, I'm not obviously super well versed in it, but I do know the idea is that God, like the Christian God Yahweh, is himself a creation of a much higher divine, as I wrote this from online, a supreme hidden God from whom the lesser God Yahweh is derived. And so in Gnosticism, God himself, who we think of as the end all be all, he was himself a creation of some higher deity. Is this sounding familiar, right? That's exactly what happens with the man in the circular ruins. He also creates this being who also seems like a full and complete being, just as Yahweh in the other traditions, Christian traditions, is also, full. He's the top dog, but there's always one layer higher. And then this begs the question, right? For whoever's dreaming this man, how far does it go back? And there's a way that a scholar described Gnosticism. Behind every creator lurks another creator, which is just, that's essential. That is that's the take home message of what this story is. Behind every creator lurks another creator. There's a line to toe when reading into... Oh, right. Toe. Yeah, I don't know which one. I think it's T-O-E. I think it's toe. Like, because you toe the... Like, you put your toe at the very line. But, it does... it really does fit the kind of numerology stuff. But, yeah, so the Gnosticism, and again, like, forming Adam, just like we talked about. This is the Adam of dreams. And, this being formed of the sacred mud and the clay. And that's interesting, too, because actually we're getting to a really key passage here with fire. Right, he has this dream, and this is what ultimately brings the thing to life, is this interaction with the god, capital F, fire, which is also, the bull, the rose, and the storm. And we talk, the light was the color of rose, and I also love that the color of a leopard's gums. It's like so random, but also just actually such a great image. And so the multiple God revealed him that his earthly name was Fire. And there's just, tons of stuff to break down there. One, actually, before I forget, a lot of times the first man is made out of clay. and there's specifically a Native American legend that I'm thinking of. It's actually kind of funny. Okay, so yeah, I'll tell it real quick. So basically that you form the man out of clay, and what happens is, they put him in an oven. They put him in fire, right? The cosmic fire. And the first time the person takes it out, it's underdone. It's underbaked. And that's white people. That's what they call, like, the race of white people. They're the undercooked people. And then he's like, okay, try it again. And then, and also Coyote is in the deity's ear the whole time. And then they put it on for too long. And yeah, take a guess. That's black people. So it's like undercooked white people, overcooked black people. And then he's like, okay, one more time, and they put the mud, right, the sacred mud, they put it in the fire, the cosmic fire that bakes the clay. And then the third time you get it just right, and you have the perfect, you have Native Americans, because obviously it's a Native American legend. But it's funny, but it's also the point too, clay is basically like, baked mud, and so you need that fire aspect. And Prometheus, right, he's the god of fire. It's that moment of enlightenment. It's that spark of consciousness. So there's so much symbology related around the fire. Also, animism, religions of animism oftentimes invoke fire as like the essential element of consciousness, and it's also related to purity, because fire will burn all things. And if I recall, it's from the Zoroastrianism idea that fire, even though it kind of like creates smoke, fire itself can never be polluted by anything. And it's also this interesting idea of just, coming up with like almost like a pure being. So let's see here. I thought it was really important that at one point he was going to bring himself to destroy his son. Part that has perhaps it would have been better. Right, yeah, because it would have been better because he would not have realized, at least, in part, that he himself is a phantasm. And yeah, almost destroying his son, almost destroying his creation. I'm reminded again actually of Frankenstein, and because that whole thing is very related to the motif of fire. It's called a modern Prometheus, right? And he gives Frankenstein gives the daemon its spark of life, but the rest of that book is him also trying to destroy his creation. So yes, and then also Agni, who is the god of fire in Hinduism, is the guardian deity of the southeast. So I'm not exactly sure, but I know south has been something that's been mentioned throughout the book, right? Everything kind of originates from the south, and you're born and sent upstream into the north. He also gets humiliated when he realizes he was dreamed. Yeah, I mean that part's just very interesting adjectives. With relief, with humiliation, with terror, he understood that he also was an illusion, that someone else was dreaming him. I mean, the relief is an interesting adjective there. I mean, I guess because he was so consumed by this project, and I guess maybe there's a relief of responsibility in realizing that he's not the ultimate he too is just the product of someone else's dream. The humiliation makes sense because, as he said, what did he say? He feared lest his son should meditate on this. What incomparable humiliation, what madness, to find out you're a simulacrum. And then what was the other one? Terror. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be terrifying just to realize, the existential terror of just realizing you're not a real being. Of course, the question of what a real being here is also called into question. And yeah, the fire analysis is, so, and there's also just tons of, fire worship has all these rituals and rites. And you'll notice that right after the dream, fire instructs the dreaming man to instruct his own son in all the rites. And once he's learned the rites, and he specifically wants to send him upstream to worship the circular ruins that lie upstream. And that's exactly what the protagonist of our story did. He gets sent upstream. Immediately he bows to the circular ruins. Throughout the story, he's sort of prostrating himself, invoking the names of the gods, and worshiping this thing, this circular ruins. And it's almost like the fire god itself is perpetuating this whole thing so that it can be worshipped. Because the line was, in this circular temple and others like it, people had once made sacrifices to him and worshipped him. So in some way, it's almost like the creation of all these beings is to just create people which are to worship and make sacrifices and offerings to the fire god. And again, so much of the fire worship stuff is involved with these very sacred rituals and rites. I almost read relief, humiliation, terror as being in order, like stages of grief. Yeah, okay, yeah, I like that. Although that's a bad note to end on. Yeah, why this cycle is happening, and again, just fire as like that divine spark. And I wanted to read a couple of lines from Heraclitus here, who is an ancient Greek mystic who has written extensively about fire. Or not extensively, I guess, but there's some really key passages. So I'm just going to read a couple, little verses here that he talks about. That which always was and is and will be ever living fire, the same for all, the cosmos, made neither by God nor man, replenishes in measure as it burns away. So if we're viewing fire as God, as like the ultimate God, and many religions did believe fire was the ultimate primal essence of all the elements, that which always was and is and will be ever living fire, right, made neither by God nor man, replenishes in measure as it burns away. It's just this endless sort of principle that again, as it burns things away, replenishes in its nature. Fire, in its way of changing, is a sea transfigured between forks of lightning and the solid earth. And then here's another verse. As all things change to fire, and fire exhausted falls back into things, the crops are sold for money spent on food. And so this verse right here, as all things change to fire, and fire exhausted falls back into things. My introduction of this book actually interpreted that as like the second law of thermodynamics. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred, right? As all things change to fire, and fire exhausted falls back into all things. So just like this almost alchemical prima materia, it's that essential element which forms the fundamental aspect of consciousness and life, and fire as the illumination of consciousness, right? Fire illuminates. That's exactly what it does. And so it's also at the end, when he gets consumed by fire, once he enters the fire, he also experiences that ultimate illumination, that realization that he is in fact too a phantasm. So yeah, tons and tons and tons of good stuff that we could talk about with fire here. All right, let's see. Oh, and then of course there's that line. At times he was disturbed by the impression that all this had already happened. So it's like, okay, we're starting, and the man that he had dreamed at the beginning, his features resembled himself. So if this is your first time reading, by this point you're at least, I think, getting hints that okay, something is amiss here. And yet he kisses his son and sends him off downstream, the whole shebang. Here, I'm gonna take a little sip break here. And the two oarsmen wake him up at night. It's also strange, right? He could not see their faces. That's another thing. A lot of the people in this book are kind of like a weird thing. Like, they drop him things off, right? It just kind of appears. But they're there, even though you haven't seen them. And here now, two people just awake him, right? It's just like where the context here is very dreamlike in this sense. And he could not see their faces. Again, they're like these sort of like nondescript beings in some sense, which I think is also like dreams. Oftentimes you have people who they don't have distinctive features. They're just sort of dream figures. And then, yep, of course, it comes full circle. The ruins itself catches on fire, which apparently has right. What had happened many centuries before was repeating itself. This question of repeating itself happening over and over, that's the circular ruins. It's of course of note that the ruins are circular because that's the endless cycle. The endless cycle of regression too. Like, one, these events have all taken place, but two, the dreamer is being dreamed by the dreamer who's being dreamed by the dreamer, right? Round and round we go. Like, I forget who said it, but the Ouroboros from earlier. And then, he finds out. So there's still a few things I wanted to talk about, but that's a lot of the really big stuff. Obviously, you can go into tons of interpretation here, but in Zoroastrianism, fire is considered like the purest element. This is pure, a creation of a pure being. Oh, and coming back to the epigraph here, and if he left off dreaming about you, which comes from through the looking glass. Apparently, the context of that scene is the character Tweedledee points to the Red King and tells Alice that she is merely a character in his dream. So in that little epigraph, right, that little fragment is also foreshadowing and hearkening to the concept of the circular ruins just as a whole, right? What if you were the character in someone else's dream? And then, okay, so I wanted to, okay, I'm still good, right? Let me make sure I can, just make real quick, okay, I think you guys can still see me. Cause I wanted to just share my screen one more time, of Zhuangzi Dream of the Butterfly. So I'm sure many of us have heard of this, oh wait, is it Zhuangzi? Oh, I think I was wrong, but here. Oh man, what the? Okay, yeah. Okay, so you guys, okay, we're good. Okay, so, oh yeah, okay, so I think Shuangzu. Okay, whoops. But so this, I think many of us have heard of this, but he has this story. Once upon a time, I dreamed myself a butterfly, floating like petals in the air, happy to be doing as I pleased, no longer aware of myself. But soon enough I awoke, and then, frantically clutching myself, Chuangzu I was. I wonder, was Chuangzu dreaming himself the butterfly? Or was the butterfly dreaming itself Chuangzu? Of course, if you take Chuangzu and the butterfly together, then there's a difference between them. But that difference is only due to their changing material forms. So, I love, that idea of, I dreamed of a butterfly, but am I, in fact, the butterfly's dream? That cycle, that relation between the two. It's also, he is not a butterfly's dream. Well, who knows, right? Who knows? But he is the dream of another person. So he dreams that he's creating a man, and he comes to find out that all the time he was perhaps the one being dreamed. And so that quote just came to mind for me in terms of the, context of this. And of course, the circle and everything. And I wanted to bring up at least one final point. I think, let me get my headphones for this part, because I'm gonna play a quick clip, and it's from. Whoa, that was weird. Okay, can you guys? I think it gave me a little staticky thing. I think I'm still good. But it's from Mulholland Drive by David Lynch, and it's the scene. It's been a long time since I've watched the movie, but it's just a scene that honestly I think I'm just gonna play it. But it's related to this, the idea of, you are the one being dreamed, or are you all within a dream? So let me share my screen. Hopefully you guys will be able to hear it. Pretty sure. I'll check back in a second. Let me know if it's weird. Otherwise, I'll just assume it's good. But so here is the diner scene from Mulholland Drive. Let me play a quick part. Make sure you guys can. You should be able to hear this.
I just wanted to come here.
So let me check. You guys, okay? Can't hear. Okay, we're cool. Okay, so it's 5 minutes, but I think it's worth it. Let's do it.
To Winkies?
This Winkies.
Okay. Why this Winkies?
It's kind of embarrassing.
Go ahead.
I had a dream about this place.
Oh boy.
You see what I mean?
Okay. So you had a dream about this place. Tell me.
Well, it's the second one I've had. But they're both the same. They start out that I'm in here, but it's not day or night. It's kind of half night, you know? But it looks just like this, except for the light. And I'm scared, like I can't tell you.
Also, sorry, real quick. He said, okay, just making sure you guys can hear still. He said it's like half day, half night. That's he doesn't know whether it's dawn or dusk in the story, and there's always like that, also that same feeling. Sorry, I had to.
Of all people, you're standing right over there. By that counter. You're in both dreams. And you're scared. I get even more frightened when I see how afraid you are, and then I realize what it is. There's a man in back of this place. He's the one who's doing it. I can see him through the wall. I can see his face. I hope that I never see that face ever outside of a dream. That's it.
So, came to see if he's out there.
To get rid of this god-awful feeling.
Right then.
Dun dun dun. Bro didn't touch his food. I'd have ate that. Say, let me get a bite. gives you chills, doesn't it? Yeah, times of day are yeah, exactly. Nate, yes, I do record my dreams. Started doing that recently. Highly recommend. You'd be amazed the type of shit you forget if you don't write it down. And also, recording my dreams has been one of the biggest things that made me realize that that type of dreams really do have psychological meaning. It's not bullshit. It's not just, finding patterns where there are none. They are absolutely, reflective of psychological stuff. But okay, so yeah, crazy scene, fantastic, right? I feel like, masterclass. But David Lynch does it again. But that idea, right? The way he's presenting it is he's been having this dream, right? This sort of terrible dream. It happens twice, and he brings this dude, basically, to find out, just to essentially make sure it's not actually happening. And he tells him how the dream goes, and he tells him there's this man out back, right? And he's the one that's doing it. So we don't know what it is, but. Anyway, so he goes, and it's like, at some point you realize his facial expressions, really, really great work there. But he's kind of realizing, I think, that the dream is playing out as it happened. But, in the beginning of, and I don't even recall how the movie goes, how that gets resolved. But, we take him to be, in the real life waking world, right? And he's talking to this dude and telling him about this crazy dream he's had, or this man out back. And he's going back to, just make sure it's not actually there. And it's, it's suspenseful, it's intense. He goes back there, and the dream figure, of course, is right there. Which I think the implication is that, one interpretation is it's, that whole thing was part of the dream as well, right? And it's this concept, this idea of, when you're going about your life, and the philosophical question of what if you were somebody else's dream, right? What if your whole living right now was but a dream? It's even almost like on some Matrix shit, right? But so, I just had to throw that in there. I think it's just relevant to, all the different stuff we've been talking about. And there's also this idea, a big idea in mysticism and things like, Buddhism and stuff, is that there is a universal mind, right? Like there's a principle of consciousness, and we are all manifestations. We are embodiments of that universal mind. And if you want to take that interpretation, then we are, in fact, the dreams of a higher being. Our entire lives are, in some ways, the phantasms of what many mystical traditions would call that universal mind, which is also described as, so many books I've read describe this as sparks. Just as a flame will produce thousands and thousands of sparks, so too are we all the individual sparks of the universal mind, which of course just relates totally back with the Agni and the Prometheus and all these different gods of fire, right? If we take this interpretation, we are the sparks of that magnificent fire, that manifold God, right? Which was a bull and a rose and a storm and a horse and all these different things. There is a version in which all the myriad phenomena, all the myriad beings of existence are but sparks of that ultimate fire God. So tons of good shit to talk about. I feel like in many ways, there's still, we could, I'm sure we could find more to discuss, but I think this seems like a good place to wrap it up. As always, we've done this twice officially, but this was a banger. Had a good time with this. Hopefully you guys got something out of this as well, and had fun in the discussion. And yeah, I'm gonna say that concludes this episode of Big Nate's Reading Club. And so we did The Circular Ruins by Borges. Absolute banger. And I'd love to do some more. We will for sure do some more Borges in the future. But that's what we got. So thank you guys for participating. I think for next week, I am debating. I'm leaning towards this essay by Carl Jung on essentially his philosophy of art and like the artistic process and separating the art from the artist, and it actually gets very mystical and supernatural. So I think that'd be a fun one to talk about. So, especially just in relation to everything we've been doing. So, all right, everybody. I will keep you guys posted with information on the Discord, but thanks everyone so much for popping out, and until next time on Big Nate's Reading Club, peace out.